All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our second and the final society seminar sponsored by the Lucy Family Institute for this semester. And it's a pleasure to host Kush Varshney. And I do apologize that we are starting a few minutes later. There was a thermodynamics exam happening in this room just before this. So I can still feel the tension. And I've never seen students looking so stressed out leading any class. But it was thermodynamics. So we can understand. But it's an absolute pleasure to be hosting my good friend and colleague and collaborator from IBM Research, Kush, Kush has been at IBM now since 2010, right? And prior to that, he received his PhD from MIT in computer and electrical engineering, and prior to that, he got his bachelor's with honors of distinction from Cornell, and all have been in computer and electrical engineering. So I was teasing with him earlier that be a computer scientist, he has seen a bit more math, so he can empathize with the thermodynamic students, leaving the room more than the computer scientists could. And at IBM and at MIT, he was also an NSF graduate fellow. So any one of you graduate students in the room who are aspiring to be a graduate fellow, if you haven't spoken to him yet, grab him after the seminar and understand what are the kicks of the trades to win that prestigious fellowship. He's a fellow of IBM at TJ Watson, and also a fellow of IEEE, which is the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, and he leads the Human-Centered Trustworthy AI Research Program at IBM Research. And prior to that, he was also the founder of the IBM Science for Social Good Initiative from 2015 to 2023. What to me is the most exciting aspects of Kush's career and contributions to the field have been he's very foundational, thinks deeply about computer science, the fundamentals about the methods, all the way from pure math to what we may think about algorithmically. But then he's also an innovator where he asks himself, what do these do from a variety of applications, whether healthcare applications, etc. And as such, he's received the extraordinary IBM Research Technical Accomplishment Award, and as well as IBM Corporate Technical Awards for Trustworthy AI and AI-powered employee journey. He's instrumental for various very successful open source toolkits, AI Fairness 360, AI Explainability 360, Uncertainty Quantification 360, AI Fact Sheet 360. The question that I would ask him at the end of the seminar is, why does everything have a 360?
Yes, we can talk about that.
Need to get to that. And then he's also a key partner with us on some of the work that Nuno is leading on, and along with Anna on benchmark advisors as well, which have also now been released in open source and Hugging Face, etc. So that truly tells you a lot about IBM's research focus, where lots of good basic foundational sciences and computer science, algorithmic work applied to application, but also a big embrace of open source movement, which makes us all collectively good and flourish as an organization. So he's going to talk about collective human agency.
Yep.
Good, please. Thank you.
Great, thanks. It's my pleasure to be here. And yeah, I think I'm the last thing before your Good Friday holiday. So thanks for being here. All right, so I'm probably going to stand on this side so I can see my slides as I talk. So yeah, as Nitesh said, the title of the talk includes collective human agency, but also individual human agency. And the AI is in quotes for a very particular reason, as I'll get to in just a second, right? So yeah, let's get going. So the reason AI is in quotes is that there's so many sort of definitions swirling around, and it's not exactly clear what is meant by this term, right? And in December, Time Magazine named its Person of the Year. Sometimes they name more than one person, so that wasn't unusual. But so they named these people over here as the architects of AI as the Person of the Year for 2025. And there's like 7.5 people on the image. Very unusual to have half a person there, but these other people that are there are all CEOs of tech companies, right? And they aren't the scientists or engineers who are building the AI systems. So they're not the ones architecting these things. So the question arises, what are they architecting, right? If they're the architects of AI, like what really is it that they're architecting? And One thing that I would argue is what they're really architecting is an AI empire. And just like any other empire that is kind of historical, so you can think of maybe like the British Empire or any sort of empire like that, it does engage in a lot of things like extractivism, so extracting data and natural resources, human labor, etc. Automation, so kind of masking biases and avoiding accountability, essentialism, so having a lot of stereotyping that's exacerbated surveillance, containment, and so forth. Okay. And also just to get us going, I think all of you or many of you have probably heard this term agentic AI, and it's become kind of a big thing these days. And just for terminology purposes, so an LLM is an LLM, so that can do sort of, I mean, these sort of things that we're familiar with. An LLM with tools can then call external tools. An assistant goes beyond that, and then an agent is really engaging in planning, multi-step reasoning. The most important in my mind is action taking, so autonomous actions, and then also self-correcting. Okay. And these things are showing up in multi-agent systems as well, where these agents interact with other agents, with humans, with the environment, and so forth. Okay. So then the question, like the title of the talk used the word agency, right? And just in terms of definition, so agency is the capacity of an actor to act in a given environment. Okay. And one way I like to talk about this is through a sequence of movies by the actor Dev Patel. And hopefully some of you are familiar with some of these movies. And the first one that he was in that became a little bit famous was Slumdog Millionaire. And in that movie, he's this poor tea seller, and the whole story is about how fate uh, gets him in all these situations, and that he knows all these answers. And the point of it is that he has no agency in this movie at all. Like everything is happening to him. He's not really doing anything to the world. Okay? And then as we move from left to right, the next movie is this Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. So he's like this sort of assistant. He's kind of running this hotel a little bit, and all these white people come to India, and he's just like doing what they say. So again, maybe a little bit more agency, but not a lot. And then over time, he gets into these more powerful sort of roles. So the Green Knight, he's like a knight of the round table, or like these sort of things. And he is like a more powerful character, but the story that is involved has nothing to do with his own sort of culture and upbringing and so forth. And then finally, all the way to the right, with Monkey Man, he's not only the character in a powerful sort of role, but it's also his own story. He's like the producer and everything. So it's a story that's really expressing his own sort of inner and past lives and all of that stuff. So he really has the full agency in that sense. Okay. Um, so when we think about agency in any given scenario, it's kind of finite. So if I have more agency, then someone else has less agency and vice versa. So when we start thinking about AI agency, it is kind of a zero-sum sort of game. So if AI has a lot of agency, then humans won't, and so forth. Okay. So that begs the question, like, if humans have low agency, what does that imply, right? So when humans tend to have low agency, then they also tend to have low dignity, especially in activities that they derive some happiness from, that they take pride in. So the visual up on the screen is the Notre Dame sort of delta framework. So dignity and agency surround all of these things, right? So which sort of activities are we talking about? How do we think about the distribution of agency in different kinds of activities? So we can think along two different axes. So there's how much risk is involved in that activity and how much complexity is there. So in the bottom left corner, so these are low risk and routine sort of things. Uh, so I took an Uber yesterday from the airport to the hotel. I need to submit the receipt for that to get reimbursed, right? So do I want to do that? Like, is that something that I would like enjoy really, really much? Probably not, right? So if an AI did that completely for me, all good. That's all really good, right? And in terms of like really complex, really high risk sort of things, so medical diagnosis is a great example. So there, it really should be human-led, right? And then there's things in the middle that are kind of human and AI partnerships. Okay. Notice that on my first example, I didn't say filling out my taxes, even though that's also something I don't like to do. And it's very similar, but the risk level is slightly higher, right? So like I would be fine, like that $30 for the Uber. If it happens or it doesn't happen, it's still okay. But if I get like audited by the IRS, that's probably a bigger deal. Okay. So, I mean, it's a combination of both the risk and the complexity. Okay. Um, so when we're talking about this distribution of agency in different AI roles, there's three kind of categories that we can think about. So there's autonomous AI, fully acting on its own. There's assistive or collaborative AI, where the human and the AI are having a mixed initiative and so forth. And then there's adversarial AI, where the human is in charge and might task AI systems or AI agents to do things for them, but they're always kind of in charge. Okay. So the low risk, low complexity ones are ones that make sense for the autonomous AI, the intermediate for the assistive or collaborative, and then high risk, high complexity for the adversarial. All right. So again, agency-wise, the agency is primarily with the AI on the first, it's balanced on the second, and it's mostly with the human on the third. Okay. All right, so when we can start thinking about these different roles, they are also associated with different kind of control flows. Okay. So this is a control flow for a fully autonomous AI agent. It's something called the React pattern that's becoming popular in the computer science world. So you have the agent, it does some stuff, it kind of gets checked, and then it might feedback and try again, right? Um, and in these sort of situations with a fully autonomous AI agent, the way I've been kind of looking at it is in terms of organizations. So on the left is a diagram of kind of a typical sort of corporate environment. There's kind of the CEO at the top, there's individual contributors at the bottom, and then there's middle management in the middle with some support staff on either side, right? So this autonomous agent is going to be doing something to help the individual contributor do their job better. And so they kind of become the CEO of a bunch of AI agents. And when these AI agents are, so with this human at the top, they do have their dignity and their agency and everything. Okay? And with these agents below them, the human needs to trust that those agents are going to do what they're supposed to do, and specifically to act without direct monitoring or control by the human executive. And this is exactly what trust is about. So it's the willingness of someone to be vulnerable to the actions of someone else without the ability to monitor or control them. And the way this can happen, there's kind of different variations. So you might end up having it where that human is at the top and all these agents are just following instructions in a command and control sort of setup from that one sort of leader. But it's also often the case that you can have what are called networks of competence. So these agents are interacting amongst themselves as well. And So there's still some human leader, but the agents are all kind of leading or following amongst themselves as well. And I'll come back to this diagram in a second. Okay. So now if we switch to the second category, this is the collaborative or assistive AI. So here we have this mix of who initiates and who responds. So this is a diagram illustrating kind of an ideation sort of workflow, and you start at number one. So there's a human facilitator who plans a workshop, and then an AI can assist with planning, and then goes to number three, the participants ideate, but then there's an AI that provides inspiration and back and forth, all right? So this is kind of that control flow or the workflow for the mixed version, right? And some of my colleagues at IBM Research, they have created examples of this. So this is a chatbot called Koala, and it will, in an ideation sort of setting, interact. It'll provide things when it feels it should, but not dominate the conversation. Okay. And the way it kind of comes about when you analyze the data is exactly this. The human and the AI are going back and forth. Okay. And then the third category, the workflow, the control flow, is kind of in an adversarial sort of setting. So the way that I like to talk about this is related to this TV show called House MD. So has anyone ever watched this TV show? It's been a while, but yeah, some people have. All right. So there's Dr. House. He's a diagnostic medicine doctor, and he has a bunch of residents. And he's always challenging them to prove him wrong. So they go about their work, they run their own tests on the patients, et cetera, but he's always in control, and they're always like he makes the final call on everything, and they're like always kind of adversarial with him. And this is exactly this adversarial sort of setup with AIs instead of the human residents. So the diagram at the bottom, the letter C, is something that some doctors have actually tried out, and the radiologists are able to find that such a setup does work. Okay. All right, so I talked through with the three categories kind of the control flow, but I didn't get to what capabilities that those AI agents should have. And so let's talk about that as well, okay? So when we're talking about the fully autonomous AI agents, there's things that we want them to have, including intelligence, which we can achieve through traditional machine learning. We want them maybe to have creativity, which is achieved through generative AI, but we also want them to have some level of wisdom, which is enabled by additional capabilities, so things that are metacognitive in a sense. So stuff like self-reflection, discretion, adaptation, and so forth. And this is exactly what organizational management researchers have called out as the three things that you need for someone to be a leader. And so when we are in this world of these networks of competence with autonomous agents interacting amongst themselves as well, we do want and need them to have all three aspects of these things synthesized together. So this wisdom sort of is one of the things that we further need to develop. Okay. And just saying a little bit more about metacognitive sort of functions. So things like humility, deference, adaptability, balancing different viewpoints, all of these are things that fall under metacognition. Okay. So some of the things, so there's a different 360 here. So this is a good opportunity to tell you why it's 360. So this is one of our toolkits that we just released a few months ago, in context explainability 360. And let me tell you the story first and then come to this toolkit. So this was back in 2018. We were creating our fairness sort of toolkit. We had decided that, yes, we're going to do it. And we put everything together. We had our internal version of it. So the code name we had was actually called Samya, and that's a Sanskrit word meaning sameness. And then when IBM does anything, it uses very like standardized names for stuff, just whatever it is, that's what you call it. So we're going to be then calling it AI fairness. And then one of the IBM Research marketing folks, her name is Claire Job McIntyre. She's now based in Australia if you want to look her up. But she came up with a bunch of options of what this naming could be. And then the 360 kind of made sense. Like AI Fairness Hub or like these sort of things didn't really like speak to us very well. So so that's how the first one was named. And then after that, we kind of wanted to ride the brand a little bit. So that's the naming scheme. And 360 implies kind of comprehensiveness, so 360 degrees. So the AI Fairness Toolkit that we put out was, and still is actually, the most comprehensive open source toolkit for bias mitigation for algorithmic fairness. All right, so this in context one, so what it does, it's for LLMs specifically, and it's a way to do this metacognition, so to understand how it is that different sort of outputs of an LLM, like how they relate to the retrieved context or the prompt and so forth. So the example here is there's a document and an LLM is providing the summary of that document. Okay, so this is a set of mathematical approaches. We're not prompting the model to give us the reasons, but doing this through some mathematical approaches. And the interesting thing is that it still figures out things that are like semantically appropriate as the reasons why the summary came out as it did. So the things that are in dark color on the top are what the algorithm figured out, right? So if we look at the first one, the darkest one, it says further skeletal remains, and the summary also says further skeletal remains. So that makes sense, right? That's the reason why the summary came out as it did. But if we look at the other dark one alongside the M54 slip road, so the word slip road never appears in the summary. And if we look at the summary, it's using the word motorway, and that never appears in the original document. So still, this algorithm is able to figure out kind of what was actually going on. Okay. Another one of our toolkits is about steerability. So how to get these models to adapt their behavior to be more relevant to the needs of the users and their communities. So the nice thing about this is there's many different methods by which you can actually change the behavior of a given LLM. You can do things on the input side through better prompting. You can do structural control. So this is fine-tuning and parameter-efficient fine-tuning and so forth. State control is what is often called activation steering, and then output control is on the decoding of the model. So with this toolkit, you can mix and match and try things however you would like. So you can fix a behavior and then try all the different kinds of methods for that given desired behavior. Okay. Another thing that we've been working on is from the humility perspective, so uncertainty quantification as a structural control, and we've been kind of making sure that the models reveal when they're uncertain and in a calibrated sort of fashion. And then on the discretion side of things, we have this contextual privacy toolkit as well. We haven't named this with the 360 because we're not fully satisfied that it's comprehensive yet, but the idea is, let's say you're a user and you're typing something into a chatbot, and you say, I'm Jane, a single parent of two, and was just diagnosed with diabetes. I'm looking for affordable treatment options. And it's not relevant to the query that she's a single parent of two, or that her name is Jane. So we can kind of recognize that and rewrite the query so that it's only passing on contextually relevant information for downstream sort of agents. Okay. So then that was the fully autonomous sort of agent that we want the wisdom in, right? So now if we move to the second category of the collaborative AI, right? So here, the default right now is these LLMs to be content generators. So they can summarize long text, they can write an email, etc. But what we want to do also is to support human content creation. So what we want to switch from is do it for me to do it with me. And that implies a bunch of things, okay? So there's many instances that you want this kind of collaboration back and forth with the AI agent and the human. The AI agent can be serving as a muse, as a problem solver, as an advisor, including a moral advisor, as a meta reviewer, as a tutor, as a devil's advocate, and so forth. And what we don't want the AI to do in these sort of situations is to be sycophantic. Okay. So what we really want is to the AI agent to be supportive. So have the right amount of agency, only take control of the artifact creation with permission from the human, and do all these other things to build upon, to be benevolent, to be specific, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But what we find, but what we find is usually that these behaviors don't actually occur with the current LLMs. Like I've been using Gemini recently to help write a paper, and I'd only ask it to provide me a critique, like, is there anything wrong with what I've written in this paragraph? And it still will kind of go back and tell me, like, a fully rewritten version, do you want to consider this whole thing, right? And that's not what I had asked it for. So, so what we really need to do is make sure that these behaviors are implemented in those models. And the way to do it, and we're working on it right now, is to use these sort of steering mechanisms to be able to achieve those kinds of behaviors. Okay. All right, so we're halfway through, and now let's switch gears from the individual agency to the collective agency. Okay. But yeah, if there's any questions at this point, happy to take one or two questions, or we can keep going, whatever people prefer. Yeah. Okay, let me keep going. Okay. So moving from individual agency to collective agency. So this is going back to what I talked about right at the beginning with what are these architects of AI really architecting? Okay. So when we're talking about aligning models, steering models, et cetera, so alignment is the goal, steering is how we achieve it. But when we think about it, most alignment, and this is a quote from this paper, which I really like by Tanji Xuan and co-authors, and they say that alignment and steering and so forth are only appropriate for AI systems that have sufficiently local uses and scopes. And otherwise, it doesn't really make sense. Okay. So we've also been doing some work on kind of what we're calling scopes of alignment. And you can think of scoping in different sort of dimensions, like competence, transience, and audience. So competence says scope the alignment to either to knowledge, to skills, or to behaviors or social norms. The transience says do that alignment only for a fixed amount of time or for all time, or fixed sort of episode versus the whole thing, and especially the audience. Is this for the entire world? Is it for a specific public, which could be an institution, a country, these sort of things? Is it for a smaller group, or is it for an individual, like one person? Okay. And when we look at this audience of alignment, I mean, this is the picture. So dyadic, small group, a large public, or the entire world. And most of the commercial sort of LLMs that are out there have been just aligned for the mass, not for any specific sort of use. Okay. And the problem with that is that when you do have a specific use, then they're not really going to be the best for it. So this is a quote from an IEEE Spectrum article saying that farmers don't want to just get the generic Wikipedia ChatGPT kind of answer. They want very location, time specific advice. Okay. And that's not all. When you have these very large models that have not been aligned for any specific group, they also lead to effects like homogenization. So if you take any of these like 20, 30 different models, whether they're from China or the US or France or wherever, and you ask them to write a metaphor involving time, almost all of them will choose to write something about rivers and then maybe a little bit about weavers, right? And just there's no diversity in the sort of thing that these models end up doing. Okay. Another sort of version of like why it's bad to kind of have these not specifically aligned and scoped sort of models is exotification. So this is a text to vision or text image sort of model. So you're prompting it to give you an image of a professional chef in a kitchen. And if it's said to be British versus Egyptian versus Indigenous American, the British one comes up with images that are very well appointed and professional looking. The Egyptian kitchen is a little bit more rustic, and especially weird is that these chefs are wearing like this old Egyptian traditional garb, which makes no sense. And then on the indigenous American side of things, the thing is reduced to cooking in front of a campfire, which again is ridiculous, right? So then collective agency is the shared capacity of a public to achieve common goals. And this is really a story about colonialism and coloniality. So colonialism is one country, sorry. Oh, oh yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, so colonialism is one country controlling another and exploiting it. Coloniality is the extension of colonialism after its formal end. So it's like how the power structures of colonialism continue to persist even after the formal end of it. And the main issue is that coloniality limits collective agency. Okay. And let me say a little bit more specifically why that is. All right. So first, just on colonialism itself. So it has, over the years, altered the values of colonized peoples. I'm not going to read these quotes. There's going to be three of them, but one comes from Africa, basically saying colonial rule disrupted the traditional machinery of moral homogeneity in practice. From South Asia, Hindus adopted a West-centric frame for understanding their tradition. And in North America, Western knowledge privileges itself as the fiduciary of all knowledge with authority to authenticate and validate other knowledge. So all of these things have been extended and do extend from colonialism to coloniality as well. There's a very famous sort of decoloniality scholar, Maldonado Torres, who wrote that the concept of religion, most used in the West by scholars and lay people alike, is a specifically modern concept forged in the context of imperialism and colonial expansion. So what does that relate to? And it relates specifically to kind of moral absolutism, and it arises in the alignment of these LLMs. So if you have a model provider, like a large tech company, and they view whatever moral philosophy that they're going with as universally correct, it could be deontology or virtue ethics or consequentialism, etc. Grigori, do you have your hand up or just stretching? I think just stretching. Yeah. Just stretching, or did you have your hand up? Yeah. Okay, cool, cool. Awesome. So yeah, whether it's yes, that's a lot of agency. Good. Yeah, it could be virtue ethics or deontology or consequentialism or whatever sort of philosophical tradition that one's starting with. But the issue is that if you have moral absolutism, then you're not allowing for any possibility of moral variety. So it marginalizes all other ways of thinking about right and wrong. And then that means that their approach is a coloniality of knowledge. So they're behaving as what's called a metropole, a colonial power, performing the so-called mass alignment for their benefit. Okay. So how does this arise, right? So first of all, it's through closed models that are delivered through APIs. Whatever the company that's providing the LLM believes is their version of right and wrong, no one else is empowered to change that. Second is this Western philosophy as the starting point. So whatever, like I said, if they're starting with deontology or consequentialism or virtue ethics or whatever, they believe that that's universally right and anything else is not. So they are promoting a moral absolutism. And then thirdly, the way that these things are happening is that the knowledge about right and wrong, about desired and undesired behavior must be presented as commandments and explicit instructions, and no other sort of way is possible. Okay? And even more so, so this moral absolutism is not only theoretical, but it's a central feature of both the practices and the technologies of that alignment. So reinforcement learning from human feedback, in terms of the practices, the workers who are often in Kenya or Nigeria or other global south sort of places must project the metropole, the tech companies' monocultural values. Otherwise, they don't get paid and other sort of bad things happen. So they're not really bringing their own values to it. They're just doing what they're kind of told. On the algorithmic side, so one of the common algorithms is called proximal policy optimization, or PPO. And when you do have non-universal values, it falls apart. It's not robust to that kind of setting. And then there's another example. It's called reinforcement learning from AI feedback. So this has been championed by Anthropic, for example, and it assumes kind of a universal constitution. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. All right. So what are possibilities? How can we think about kind of the decoloniality, the decolonization, right? So this slide is kind of talking about how you might decolonize knowledge in the sciences, right? But it applies just as well to AI. So openness is one way. So having open artifacts is one sort of way. In terms of openness to society, you should have knowledge that's coming not only from the privileged few, but from a larger set of people. And in terms of openness to excluded knowledges, so you should have the ability to bring values forward that aren't necessarily given only as commandments or in a single book. Okay. So these are some of the things which lead us to kind of a general set of desiderata for decolonial AI alignment. So the LLM should be open enough that app developers can tune them to their needs, to the needs of their communities, and so forth. Values should not be assumed universal, so contextual and relational values can come from the communities in which the LLM will be deployed, and values from different kinds of knowledge from different epistemologies should be possible. Okay. All right, so these are these desiderata, but let us pause for a second and think about, if I do all of those things, is there even like a second order coloniality in doing so, right? And the way I'm going to explain this is actually making use of what I just said, right? So I'm going to use a non-Western sort of approach and use it not as a commandment, but as a story to tell you kind of this idea of second order coloniality, right? So there's a famous epic called the Mahabharata, and within that there's an episode of this youth from who lives in the forests, and his name is Eklavya, and he wants to become the world's greatest archer. And so he goes to the royal sort of teacher who can teach him to become the world's best archer. And the royal teacher says, "No, I won't teach you." But this guy, he still like learns to become the world's best by kind of imagining that he's learning from the teacher, and then later on they encounter each other in the forest, and the person from the forest, Eklavya, he says that, "Oh, I've become the world's best by thinking of you," and then the royal teacher asks him to cut off his thumb and present that as kind of an honorarium or tuition for that knowledge. And when you don't have a thumb, you can't hold a bow and arrow in the best possible way, and you're no longer the best anymore. And so the point of the story is that even if everything is done properly and and you get all of the knowledge, all of this sort of openness and everything. If the cost is too high in terms of cutting off your thumb, literally, or kind of in terms of socioeconomic costs or other costs, then you really have not done the full decolonization that might have been intended. So instead, what we really need to have is kind of lower cost sort of approaches that allow this sort of thing to happen without the second order sort of coloniality. And one way to approach this is through what's called bottom of the pyramid innovation. So this is a term that's been used for a long time, and it's been used to say that what are the characteristics of technologies that need to be used in low-resourced environments? But it was mostly applied to like things like stoves or stuff like that. But a lot of the criteria, like focusing on price performance, having appropriate functionality, de-skilling things, having robustness, etc., are all applicable to AI as well. And something that we just came out with a few weeks ago, we're calling the Next Billion AI Index, or NextBax, is kind of mapping those sort of 12 bottom of the pyramid innovation characteristics very specifically to AI. And we kind of lost a couple in doing so. So there's 10 instead of 12, but they kind of map to these three larger categories. So effective efficiency, operational practicality, and social integrity, right? So on the efficiency side of it, one thing that we work on quite a bit at IBM Research is small language models, and specifically our IBM Granite family of models. And this is really, I mean, the way I think things should be, because you really don't need like, these humongous like trillion parameter models for almost any sort of task that would make sense. Okay. The second is on this operational practicality. So something that we're working on quite a bit is what we call generative computing. So it's replacing kind of flaky generative AI with prompting, with surrounding the language model with frameworks that make it more structured, maintainable, robust, and efficient. Okay? And a paradigm that we've open sourced recently is called Melia. So it's a way to do this, right? And then third, on the social integrity, we need to be able to align to community needs. So define the desired and undesired, the good and the bad, the right and the wrong, by engaging with the community themselves, and then kind of doing it in such a way that the models can be instructed to do so, and kind of make sure that that actually happened. Okay. And the methods themselves don't kind of do all of it, right? So there's also the ownership model question. So even if we do all of these things and the tech company kind of still owns the rights to these models and the fine tuning and all of that, it still might be problematic. So this is a quote from a document by Schultz and Tortorici, which just came out a few months ago. So it pretty much recaps what I started with. So making the point that if AI is to be reclaimed from the hands of corporate monopolies, then its governance must remain as close as possible to those affected by its deployment. And cooperatives provide a structural counterweight to the monopolization of AI by Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, and Amazon, whose economic incentives prioritize surveillance, which I had said before, automation-driven labor displacement, which was the extraction and the extraction of user data for profit. All right, so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. So just to summarize, we were talking about agency overall. First half was about individual agency, second half was about collective agency. And on the individual agency side, the things that we have to work on and think about are kind of the roles that are possible for AI to take, the control flows that they imply, and what capabilities we might need from those AI agents. And then on the collective side, kind of scoping the alignment appropriately, doing it in a sort of decolonial sort of fashion, and making sure that we don't have the second order sort of coloniality on top. So focusing on the needs of the next billion people. So let me end there, and yeah, happy to take questions.